Tonight, when the work is finally done, you're gonna reach for your phone. You'll scroll through a few dozen short videos. You'll open a game. You'll let your thumb move on its own, back and forth, without really thinking about it. You probably assume this is a habit of the digital age. But the real answer is far stranger. 4,000 years ago, in a city on the banks of the Euphrates, someone was doing almost exactly the same thing. No phone, just a wooden board inlaid with shell and lapis lazuli, 20 squares, and a handful of pyramid-shaped dice. They were playing. And they were playing for the same reason you are, tonight. You probably picture ancient life as pure survival, hunting, gathering, running from predators. No room for fun. That's the version of the past most people carry around. But archaeology tells a very different story. Humans, everywhere, in every era, stopped to play. Go back to 1922. The archaeologist Leonard Woolley was excavating royal tombs in the ancient city of in what is now southern Iraq. Buried in the ground, he found a small wooden box decorated with shell and deep blue lapis lazuli. It was a game board. Later it became known as the Royal Game of It's roughly 4,600 years old, older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. For decades, nobody knew the actual rules. The board just sat in a museum case, beautiful and silent, until Irving Finkel, a cuneiform expert at the British Museum, found a clay tablet describing the rules in ancient Babylonian script. He translated it. And for the first time in 4,000 years, modern people could sit down and play the exact game their ancestors once played. But the more interesting part isn't the rules, it's how far this game traveled. The archaeologist Walter Christ, now at Maastricht University, spent years tracing the royal game of across the ancient map. He found nearly identical boards in Egypt, in Cyprus, in Crete, even as far as Sri Lanka. Same game, same 20-square layout, spread across thousands of kilometers over hundreds of years. You might ask yourself, why would a leisure game spread so far and so fast, when travel back then was slow and dangerous? The answer is that a game was never just a game. It was a social technology. When merchants, envoys, or mercenaries stopped in an unfamiliar land, language wasn't always enough to connect them with the local people, but a game board could. You sit down, you point at the pieces, you play. And in that moment, two strangers, from different cultures, speaking different languages, find something in common. Games are one of the oldest communication technologies humans ever invented. Ancient Egypt had a game of its own, and it reveals something even deeper than entertainment. It was called Sinet. It appears in the archaeological record as early as 3100 BCE, and boards for it turn up in nearly every royal tomb, including the tomb of Tutankhamun. The Egyptologist Peter Piccioni, who has studied Sinet for decades, points out that it started as a simple game between friends, but over time, the Egyptians began attaching a completely different meaning to it. They came to believe the journey of the pieces across the board represented the journey of the soul through the afterlife. Winning the game meant the soul had successfully passed its trials on the way to eternity. Pause on that for a second. A casual pastime, played to pass idle hours, slowly became a sacred symbol for the fate of the human soul after death. The line between play and religion, it turns out, is much thinner than you'd think. Go back even further, before cities, before writing, and people were still playing, using whatever they had on hand. Ankle bones from sheep or goats, called astragali, have been found at archaeological sites across Europe and the Middle East, some thousands of years old. People threw them like dice, guessed which side would land face up, gambled with them, used them for divination, or simply passed the time around a fire. This is likely the oldest form of dice humans ever used, and it predates agriculture. It predates permanent settlements. Even nomadic hunter-gatherer groups, living lives usually assumed to be the harshest and most precarious in human history, still carved out time to set up a game of chance. This leads to a harder question. If even in the most brutal survival conditions imaginable, people still made time to play, is play really just a luxury? Or is it something closer at Boston University, has spent years studying the role of play in human evolution. He argues that play isn't leftover childhood behavior or idle downtime. It's the mechanism the human brain uses to learn cooperation, to test risk in a safe setting, and to build trust between people who aren't related to each other. Hunter-gatherer groups that survived for tens of thousands of years didn't do it through nonstop labor alone. They survived, in part, because they knew how to play together. The Dutch cultural historian Johan Huizinga once proposed a concept called Homo ludens, meaning man the player. He argued that play isn't a byproduct of civilization, it's the foundation of it. Law, ritual, even art, he claimed, all trace back to the same instinct that makes people invent a game and agree, together, to follow its rules. Now think about the phone in your hand. When you open a game at the end of the day, your brain isn't doing anything new. It's repeating a behavior that's tens of thousands of years old. The rush you feel as a die tumbles, whether it's a sheep's ankle bone 4,000 years ago or a spinning wheel on a screen, activates the same reward circuitry in your brain either way. The sense of connection you feel playing online with a stranger you've never met is, at its core, not so different from two merchants sitting down at a royal game of board 4,600 years ago. You might think of free time today as something modern, a reward from industrial society, a brief pause carved out between shifts of labor. But archaeology says the opposite. Play was never something humans invented once they had enough spare time. Play was something humans always found a way to make time for, even when there was almost no time to spare. So tonight, when you pick up your phone after a long day and your thumb drifts on its own toward another game, remember this: you're not escaping into something modern. You're continuing a ritual older than writing, older than cities, one your ancestors, gathered around a fire tens of thousands of years ago, once carried out too, under a completely different sky, but driven by exactly the same need: